Has anyone here ever been a soldier fighting against the US? What was it like? My grandfather was conscripted to fight for the North Korean military during the Korean War. He was at the Battle of Incheon, and he likened the dread that he felt to what one must feel when faced with a massive tidal wave that is about to engulf you and everyone you know. Couple this with the fact that many North Korean troops were told horror stories that the American troops were cannibals, for example, and that the average American Marine was much taller and more physically robust than the average North Korean soldier. You can imagine how scared he was. He said that the Chinese and North Korean units were absolutely obliterated and that they never stood a chance against the Marines. All his words, not mine. Hopefully this won't get buried, but my hopes are not too high. My father was a sniper during the bombardment in Yugoslavia, and my best friend's father was a member of the elite unit called Tigers while the war in Kosovo was raging. I'll be short because I have to sleep, but my father told me it was like trying to repel a wave on the beach by building a castle out of sand. You fought. You may have won some small encounters, be it by accident or pure luck. But you always knew that if they wanted, they could just kill us all and be done with it. Not a nice time for Yugoslavia, that's for sure. I was in Kosovo during the war. My sister almost got killed by a Serbian sniper. Fuck. Like I said in another comment, that's how the KLA felt against the Serbian military. I don't think it was as bad as the USA, but Serbia was fighting farmers with a K-47S. My dad was never with us, and I was scared I would never see him again. Some of my cousins died fighting, others never returned from prison camps. We would hear horrible stories about Serbian soldiers and how they were animals. When we were marching across the border into Macedonia, some of the soldiers would give us food and tell us that they were sorry for what we were going through. It was surreal and we didn't trust them. We actually threw the food away because we thought it was poisoned even though we were starving. Now I realize that they were just trying to stop the suffering, I guess. Yugoslavia may have been bad, but it was nothing compared to time in Kosovo during the war. Former active army infantry here. Not sure how I'd feel if I met someone who told me they were former JAM. There were dozens of different armed groups fighting each other and fighting the coalition forces at the same time. My first deployment, it was mostly the Mahdi army. On the one hand, a lot of them were poor, unemployed kids with zero prospects for employment or education. The only possible option for them was to grab a rifle and show up with the rest of the ski masks and run into coaxial machine gun fire or dig a hole for $20 and get blown apart by an Apache. So I have some empathy for the plight of the poor, uneducated, unemployed Shiite youth who took up arms to fight the imperialist stormtrooper invaders. Sure, yeah, if Red Dawn happened, I'd be in the woods with the Wolverines too. Roger that. On the other hand, kidnappings, torture, rape, execution, burning the Sunnis out of their homes, corruption of the police force, the 3 dead preteens we found kidnapped, tortured, and murdered. The 10-year-old kid shot in the head right in front of me by a sniper. The 90-plus civilian murder victims we found just in the first month of our combat tour. The kid whose tongue they cut out because he liked to chat with us when we rolled by his neighborhood. The fact that Muqtada al-Sadr is now an officially recognized member of the Iraqi government. So, yeah, I can't do it. I can't forgive them. My great-uncle fought on the German side of Second World War. He fought all over the place. Africa, Italy, a small stint in Russia, and he defended France from the D-Day invasion. He was later able to move to the United States as a war refugee. He said that all of his officers would constantly tell him, when you're fighting the Americans, you must think of the least probable way they will attack you, because that will be the way that they attack you. He also said that when you were fighting Americans more so than any other country's army he fought, You had to have eyes in the back of your head. Sebastian Junger very briefly touches on this in War. He writes at length about how incredibly terrifying and physically transforming it is to be in combat for American soldiers. Given all that, Junger then asks one of the American soldiers what it must be like for a Taliban combatant to face off against an Apache helicopter, and the soldier pretty much just shudders. My great-uncle was on the Italian side in Second World War and was a captured POW to America. From what he told me, people wanted to be captured by the US. They were treated badly by their own, and how great America was. In WW1, the Germans, and some of our allies, often commented on how chaotic the US Army appeared to be. I believe the quote was, "War is chaos, and the American Army practices it on a daily basis." Other armies were slow, disciplined, methodical, etc. The perception was that Americans were unpredictable, undisciplined, but prone to ingenuity. Not just our generals, but right down to the grunt soldier level. I understand most who fought us viewed this as a great strength. Gonna be buried, but oh well. My dad was an anti-aircraft gunner in Hanoi during the Vietnam War. He still wakes up screaming in the middle of the night, quite often really. My dad did basic training in Vietnam before he managed to escape, but as a kid, I remember him telling me stories about how fucked up everything was during wartime. He was in his 20s when it was all going down, but he remembers walking through a field with his friends and in a split second, several of them blew up from a landmine. Another story he told me that sticks to me to this day was when some of his friends went out drinking the night before they were supposed to enlist. Sitting around a table, completely hammered, singing songs and trying to forget about the terrible things they may have to encounter. One of the friends dropped a grenade underneath and ended it all before the hell even began. I'm an American soldier, so I'm not what you're looking for, but I'm guessing you won't find much on here. So I'll give you an analogy from some evasion training I got when getting ready for less visible operations. We were learning how to escape if you're being chased, and one of the things we trained for was trackers using dogs. The dog handlers explained it like this. Look, the dogs we use are so good at what they do, so perceptive that they will find you. You won't be able to fool that dog. So you need to fool the handler. Travel in erratic patterns, backtrack, make it seem to the handler that the dog has lost the scent and is just wandering. You can't beat the dog, but you might be able to beat the man. That is what fighting the US military is like. If the man behind the dog has decided you're the enemy, you've already lost. There are many, many brave fighters out there, on our side and against us, but when it comes down to it, we are going to win in a direct fight. Sure, bad things happen and we lose a battle here and there, but in a war we will win. The trouble is that the world is learning. No one wants to fight us in a war anymore. They don't go after the dog. They go after the man behind the dog. Jack up the cost of the conflict, 'cause civilian casualties force us into lose-lose situations and our support crumbles. Then our handlers say, "Okay, boy, we're not finding him today. Let's go home." ADIT before I catch hell for this. When I say the trouble is no one wants to fight us in a war anymore, I mean us as in the military. They figured out that targeting civilian populations that can't defend themselves is more effective in defeating the man behind the dog. War is an absolutely fucking awful thing, but I'd rather the bad guys go after me, my rifle and my buddies, than the family who just happened to be unfortunate enough to be living in the middle of it all. It'd be kinda hard to face all of those wrecks to respond to this. Be a soldier.be in a country against the US.BEA in actual combat. Survive it. Go on Reddit and find this post. I'm a sapper in the Australian Army, and I've spent months living out bush performing enemy party. Basically, OPFOR. We wore different uniforms. Usually Vietnam olive drab or desert cams grew beards and lived like insurgents, so one does pick up the thought patterns of a soldier fighting a coalition army. Half the day was spent killing time, reading, talking smack in politics, playing cards, eating rations. Then the rest was combat and cereals. So we'd march out to a position and hit the soldiers' troop harbor at night, probing, trying to capture weapons, and packs are being challenged and bumping them with a few rounds before withdrawing. The majority of the combat tasks were during the day, however. We'd perform ambushes and conducting prisoner wounded/surrendering serials. One thing that was surprising was how often soldiers, particularly officer cadets, would commit war crimes, clear violations of the laws of armed combat. Most of them accidental, a few not. One example was I observed a scout and then withdrew to the edge of a clearing until I had a visual on the rest of the section. I bumped a few rounds, then waited for them to advance with fire and movement while my partner moved around their rear. Once they were within 40 meters of my position, then I would display that I had surrendered, rifle raised above my head, or hands up, shouting, "Nick Schiessen." Almost consistently, I was shot after they ceased fire by one of the section's members. Commonly, one would fire and the rest would open up, and twice I was clearly executed, close distance, in verbal contact, and then shot with blanks. This is training, but it was surprising. The chaos of a firefight would create friendly or enemy mentality. No gray zone emerged for wounded combatants or surrendering parties. Also factoring in trigger-happy 18-year-olds in a purely training environment may account for this, but still, it was interesting. We also did civilian interactions. No weapons and us wearing Hawaiian shirts and jeans. 50% we'd be lit up, and 50% they would challenge and conduct prisoner handling. Thoughts on being an enemy was being how men in pairs against a section. We were able to observe the enemy for a while, follow and note how they perform. The majority were very professional. In the bush, a section, 8 men in 2 squads, including signaler with radio, 2 machine gunners, 2 scouts, etc., is rather loud even when they're trying to be cautious. Also, despite the odds, the enemy who opens an engagement might hit 2 or 3 before the rest of the section advances and can close and kill. I noted also how you can exploit Western ROEA, rules of engagement. Like in one position I opened up from a tree on an advancing unit. I got at least 4 of a section, then I surrendered/fell out of tree. It was a bad fall. Here I was able to eliminate half a section and due to rules of war be captured and remain alive. Chances are, if I wasn't shot, I'd be fed, clothed, and sheltered after killing 4 of their countrymen. Interesting thought when I reflect on a real-world example.
Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget subscribe and watch our next videos. Bye!